So last talk, I actually criticized a bunch of Muslim female comedians. And I was really upset, because, oh, come on in. Assalamualaikum. I was really upset because I had found out about a group of Muslim comedians that were coming together. They were going to do a show, and I was so excited to watch them, and I felt like they really missed an opportunity to teach people about beautiful Islam. So I watched a bunch of these comedians, and I felt like they really trashed Islam, and they trashed Muslims, and really just, it made me really upset. And I was so angry that by the end of my talk, I was like, okay, you know what? Next time, I'm going to do my own comedic monologue. And I sort of said it jokingly, but then I started kicking it around. And you know what they say about anger? Anger leads to insanity, and insanity to maybe arrogance. And so you're not supposed to get angry if you're a Muslim. But I thought, you know what? I don't care. I'm doing it anyway. All of that stuff happened, and so I started then watching Muslims stand up again. And I really appreciate it. Actually, people reached out to me and they really supported what I said. And they said thank you because. We've watched Muslim comedians, female comedians, and I didn't pick on men, I just picked on the women. And they said, we really agree with you that, a lot of this is just sort of like gratuitous vulgarity, and it's a real shame. And, and so I was just angry and insane and arrogant and thought, I want to prove that I can do it, and I can do something funny and not trash Islam and Muslims. So, okay, and people sent me links to, comedians, and they're like, here, Grace, you'll probably like him. So I watched a lot of people come on in, Tez Ilyas from the UK, Ismail Lutfi, Mo Amr, and a bunch of people that I just sort of found. And I really actually loved someone named Riyad Musa, who I found on Netflix on a show called Comedians of the World. So if you have a chance to watch him, I thought he was really brilliant. He's out of South Africa, and he was really funny. And all of these people, did a wonderful job of being hilarious without trashing Muslims and Islam. So, I started thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna try and do it. Comedians are, they have a certain mix of brilliance, and they sort of have a curiosity, and they tend to see life from a unique perspective, and they have a healthy dose of masochism. And I thought, this is perfect. This is exactly what converts are like. So certainly I should have the ability to do this. So I stayed up really late last night, and I've been thinking about it for a couple of weeks and whatever. And I was trying to push my brain to be funny, and it was like. Yeah, I managed to come up with a couple of jokes, and the arrogance got the best of me. So, does anyone want to hear the couple of jokes?
Yes. Yes, go.
Yes. So my first one, I need an uncle, someone who has a good uncle impression. Ahmed.
Ahmed.
I need someone who could just go with me, just improvise with me.
Okay.
Knock knock.
Who's there?
Okay, it's got to be uncle.
Okay.
Uncle.
Like a stereotypical offensive thing.
Yeah, like you're at the mall.
Stereotype.
Okay. Knock knock.
Who is there?
Convert.
Who? Gone who?
Yes, exactly. That's my first joke. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, how about this one? So why did the convert cross the road?
Why?
What?
Obviously to run away from the mosque. Obviously. Well, thank you for laughing. I take it as charity. So that was about it. So I very quickly realized that this was not my gift and not what God was planning to do. So I thought, well, okay, maybe at least I can, because, comedy is like a specialty, unlike anything else. If you're going to be an engineer, you go to engineering school. You're going to be a medical doctor, you have to go to medical school. You're going to be a businessman, you got to get your MBA, right? Every specialty requires specialists. And comedy is like that. But, sorry, excuse me, there's one exception, and that's law. I mean, because obviously you can go to the mosque and an engineer, medical doctor, or businessman can teach you about Islamic law. They actually do a good job of that at the Islamic Center of Southern California. So, I mean, but I have my moments, you know, I can be funny, but I'm not, like, I'm terrible joke teller, but I figured, okay, so at a minimum, maybe what I can do is just tell some funny stories. Because a lot of funny things happen to me, and I think of all the funny things that happen to Muslims, I think some of the most funny happen to converts, of course. Because, you know, it's a little bit hairy, like when you're a convert and you're, you know, entering the mosque for the very first time, and it's just sort of that combination of sort of, you know, lack of knowledge and a little unfamiliarity with the unknown, and maybe sort of like an unawareness of sort of polite social conventions. And it's like a perfect storm. All of those things come together to greet the convert. Did you get that? Let's do that one more time. It looks great on paper, okay? So just imagine the community, the Muslim community coming together to meet the convert. Lack of knowledge, right? Unfamiliarity or newness to, you know, to the unknown, and a lack of awareness of polite social conventions. Coming together to greet the convert. Okay, I thought it was anyway. So, but you know, because the Muslim community really just doesn't know what to do with converts. But I actually, you know, I love being a convert. I've been a convert now for 25 years. And, you know, one of the things that, you know, I really loved about being a convert is, you know, like as a Muslim, you're not supposed to lie, right? And I'm a horrible liar. Like, people can tell that I'm lying, and I get really anxious, and I feel sort of like viscerally ill, and I just don't like it. And so I remember this story. You know, I used to, when I was working in brand management at Johnson & Johnson, when I was early as a Muslim, I worked with this really lovely woman. Her name was Kitty Haynes, and she was sort of like my manufacturing counterpart. She's a really, really sweet and very smart and very decent person. And so one day we were all sort of hanging out and just chit-chatting, and then she kind of made the comment, "I don't lie." And we're like, "Oh, come on, Kitty. You know, everybody lies. You know, everybody lies about little things." She's like, "No, seriously, I don't lie." And that was something that really stuck with me. It was really inspirational because I love the idea of like just stating, like, you know, like she was basically saying like the sky is blue. She said it so matter-of-factly, you know, with a lot of humility and just a lot of conviction. And I was like, you know, I want to be able to do that. I want to say that I don't lie and really mean it. And I just felt, you know, so I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And that for me was sort of a point of empowerment and liberation. Because it's one thing, you know, when you're in a situation, you know, you don't really want to lie, and you kind of like assume that you won't, but you never really quite know until you're in that situation. But if you actually, you know, make that premise, you say to yourself, this is a principle of who I am and how I live, I don't lie, all of a sudden it's just this incredible, you know, empowerment. So 25 years later, like, I still remember that, you know, and I put it in my back pocket and I carry it around with me, and, you know, I like to say, I don't lie. But then I had kids. And I do honestly try, you know, even Nito, our son, I've always told him, I don't lie. And he's like, no, come on, Mom. Are you sure? Are you serious? You never lied? And I'm like, no, really, you know, and I try, you know, you can be smart about telling the truth, right? If somebody like comes and asks you, you know, like, am I wearing this dress to make me look fat? You don't have to say, well, yes, it makes you look fat. You know? I mean, you can say, I don't prefer it. I might have picked something else. But anyway, so you know, like that's, so I find my way around making sure that I don't lie. And you know, being a Muslim convert is, you know, it's a little bit like being a recovering alcoholic. I mean, you kind of want to atone for the sins of the past, and you want to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes moving forward. And you know, I've talked before about how you're a little bit of a perfectionist, and so you want to make sure that, you know, if you can avoid it, you don't want to make any mistakes or do anything wrong. And so, you know, that can get a little bit, you know, challenging, but you have that in your mind. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff that you have to learn. So, you know, like obviously you have to learn how to pray, when to pray, how to speak Arabic and all that stuff. And people were really nice about helping me, like, get up to speed on that. But there's a lot of other stuff too, like the exceptions to prayer that you also have to learn. So there are things like, well, what happens if you come to the mosque late and people, have already started praying? Like, how do you join prayer, or do you sit it out and wait for the next prayer? Or if you're traveling, that you don't have to pray all your prayers. You can shorten your prayers, and you can pray them together, or what happens if you miss prayer altogether? And you also learn things like wudu, so like the whole idea of ritual purity. You have to wash your hands, wash your face, and wash a whole bunch of things. And this is actually part of prayer. So you can't actually pray, like your prayer doesn't really count unless you actually are ritually pure. And then you also learn, people tell you, like, here are the things that actually break your ritual prayer, so that your prayer doesn't count. So if, for example, you fall asleep, or you go to the bathroom, or you pass gas, or something like that, then you have to do your ritual purity, your wudu, again. So, but there are certain things that no one tells you as a convert, and nothing can prepare you for until you are actually in that situation. So this happened to me. It's like very embarrassing because no one can help you. So let me start by saying, one of the things I really loved about being a convert was just the notion of group prayer. Like, the gathering of people, and the feeling that, you're like worshiping in a community, and, you're coming together for your love of God. And it's really lovely, especially when you're like at someone's home and you're praying together, jama'at together. But when you go to the mosque, it can be, a little bit more, frightening, or a little bit anxious. So there was this one day where I had gone to the mosque, and I, was there in time. I think it was probably Asr prayer. And, I was in the middle of the line, and it was lovely. I had women on either side of me, and in front of me, and back of me. And so we started praying, and we did the first rak'ah, felt lovely. Then we're praying second rak'ah. Somewhere in the second rak'ah, I passed gas. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? I don't, no one told me what to do if I'm praying. Because, and if this was like my 5th grade, I'm telling the story to my son, the 5th grade version of him, he'd be like, I'm past gas in prayer. That's really funny. But that was not it for me. For me, this was like a huge existential crisis, okay? Because, okay, one, I had wudu now, and my wudu is gone. It's done. I'm not supposed to be praying. My prayer doesn't count. Okay, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that, because I can do wudu again, and I can just make up my prayer. But now I'm like, what do I do for the next 2 rak'ahs? If I continue to pray, I'm lying. I'm like praying to God, and I'm lying. I'm not supposed to be praying, and it doesn't count. So I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? Do I keep praying and lie to God? Or do I like run for the door? And I was like, oh my God, okay, well, what's more important? Lying to God, or irritating people? And I'm like, well, of course, it's worse to lie to God. So, okay, fine. I made the decision. I have to get out of here. I can't pray anymore. I have to get out of here. And I don't know what it's like for, in the men's section, but in the women's section, it's really scary, because you have these like scary aunties that, at the beginning of prayer, they tell you to line up, and they're like, straighten your lines, no gaps in between the line, because that's where shaitan comes in, right? And so I'm like, oh God, okay. And you're not supposed to walk in front of people when they're praying. And there I am, I'm in the middle, and women on both sides of me, in front of me and in back of me. And I'm like, okay, I just gotta do it, I just gotta do it. So thank God when they did another rak'ah, I was like, oh God. And I couldn't get all the way out. So I was like, oh God, okay, please just do another rak'ah. And then they did another rak'ah, okay. And I like made it all the way out, and I was like sweating, and I was hot, and I was like, okay, but alhamdulillah, I'm not lying to God. Now, ladies and gentlemen, have you ever, in any time you've gone to the mosque, seen someone leave prayer like that in the middle of prayer? No, of course not, because only an idiot convert would do that. Okay, but I did it, and it was just so painful. So, but anyway, no one prepares you. You just kind of have to figure it out on your own. Okay, so, the aunties are pretty scary. I mean, they really are scary. And you sort of think that a lot of times, they're going to be the source of your new trauma, but it actually can come from sources that you actually don't expect. So when the professor and I got married, we got married in Princeton, New Jersey, and then we moved to Texas because he had a teaching position in UT Austin. And so the first time we went to the mosque there. We had a lot of stories from this mosque. It was pretty funny, but there was like a main house where the men would pray, and then sort of a separate house where the women would pray. So I remember I went to the women's section, and you know, again, this was like early in my I've probably been like a Muslim for, you know, like maybe 2 years at the most. So I went in, and you know, there were these women there, and they saw me, and I think that they were kind of like curious, like, oh, this is an Asian woman, she must be a convert. So they came up to me, and they were like, oh, you know, Assalamu alaikum, where are you from, you know, all this stuff. And they were like really excited, and I think in the excitement of the moment, they were like, you know what, next Jummah, we want to come and we want to give you a gift. We want to bring you a hijab. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's really nice. And they were like, well, do you prefer a Saudi hijab or a Pakistani hijab? And I'm like, you know, I don't know. I really didn't know the difference. And I'm like, anything, that's fine. So they're like, okay, we'll bring it for you next week. So next week I went, and they weren't there. And you know, it's fine. I didn't think anything. And then the following week, one of them came, and she saw me, and she was a little bit embarrassed. She's like, oh, you know, I'm really sorry. My friend is making the hijab, and she'll bring it for you next week. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then, you know, a couple weeks passed, and I would see them, and I would run into them, and clearly they would always have forgotten their gift. But the more they saw me, the more uncomfortable they became, and they were kind of like, you know, irritated, because it's kind of like I became the reminder of, you know, maybe of their conscience that they didn't give me this gift. So I was like, you know, really, it's fine, don't worry about it. So finally one day, I show up, and they're like, Assalamu alaikum, here, we have a gift for you. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much, that's so sweet, you know, and they gave it to me, it was in a brown paper bag. And so I took it to the car, and this is not the actual one, but it's a likeness of it. So, do you remember the story? So I get to the car, and I open it up, and I swear to God, it's a Hanes cotton black t-shirt that looks like this, okay? They've cut the arms off and sewn it together. Okay, so I'm like looking at this, and I'm like, okay. So imagine, you know, this is like sewn close, right? And it's like, I guess, you know, it's really good. So I guess it was supposed to fit all the way down my arms, like this. Can someone tell me, is this a Saudi or a Pakistani? True story, okay? I can't, you know, like honestly, you can't make this stuff up. So, you know, the other thing that is beautiful, I mean, there's a lot of beautiful stuff, you know, obviously as a convert. And, you know, you learn a lot of things, you know, like, I love, for example, when you're praying and you put your finger up, you know, and it's sort of a sign of like the oneness of God, and you kind of remember, and, you know, it's like you see even like, you know, remember the really tragic New Zealand shootings, and, you know, you saw someone getting carted away, you know, on a stretcher or on a gurney, and he had his finger up. Do you guys remember this? And it was so beautiful, right? And you hear that oftentimes when people are ill, you know, they also have their finger up, you know, and it's kind of a beautiful like moment of sacredness and connection to God. Come on, Assalamu alaikum. And so, you know, it's a very beautiful symbol, and people are not necessarily aware of that. But, you know, in the women's section, the finger takes on a whole new meaning. It actually becomes a weapon of intimidation. Does anybody know what this means? What?
Hair.
Cover your hair.
Yeah, it means you have one hair sticking out of your hijab. Okay, and these scary aunties wield that finger, and they come after you. And it's never like a gentle, oh, you know, just tuck it in. It's always like a very angry finger that tells you to get your thing. And then there's also the wrist variation. Because if you're wearing, God forbid, a 3/4 sleeve shirt, you know, you're not covering all the way to your wrists. And I tell you, this has happened to me in Egypt, in the US, in every state. It's happened to me so many places. And it's just, it's really, really traumatizing. And, you know, the thing that, you know, it's like so many things like this happen, especially in the women's section, so it's sort of sad. The last time it happened, I mean, these things used to really bother me, honestly, when people would come up and they would, like, tell me these things. And I mean, it wasn't just the aunties, it was everybody, you know, I mean, anyone who looked nice could all of a sudden, you know, have a very sweet sister. You know, it always starts with a sister. Like, you know, an instantaneous change. And it used to really bother me a lot, and so I, you know, would just kind of hold it in, and I would just get really upset, and I'd come and tell the professor I'd get really upset. And then after a while, I think after maybe I matured a little bit, I thought, okay, fine, you know, that's their problem, they're focused on the hair, you know, there are other things obviously that we should be thinking about, but if that's what they're so focused on, I'm just going to say thank you and ignore them and keep going. So I did that. The most recent time it happened to me was at the Islamic Center of Southern California. And, you know, I mean, things like this happen in every mosque, so I don't mean to just, like, get on their case. Although they do uniquely crazy things, just to say. But there was a woman, we were actually there because the professor was giving a khutbah, and it was so beautiful that by the end I was, like, tearing. And we were, like, getting up to pray, and I just felt like this woman was, like, staring at me. And this happened before, like, you know, there have been times where I was, like, praying, and I was praying for something that was really, like, sad for me, or that I wanted God to, you know, God's help with, and I would be crying, and you know, nice women would come up and they would say, you know, sister, may Allah answer your prayers, you know, whatever it is that you're feeling sad about, inshallah, inshallah, there's always a way. So that's what I was sort of expecting, because that's kind of what you expect at a mosque. So I was sitting there and the tear was rolling down, and the woman was staring at me, and I was saying, okay, she's staring at me, you know, she's probably gonna say something really nice to me. So I opened my eyes and I look at her, and she's like the ugliest stink face I had ever seen, like so angry. And I was so shocked because I was coming from a place of like, oh, this was so beautiful. I felt like the divinity, you know, to that stark change that I didn't say. She was supposed to pray next to me. And I was like, I'm not praying next to this woman. So I grabbed my purse and I moved like 2 lines away. And I could just feel the shock on her face. You know, and it's like, it's funny, but at the same time, it's like you don't know whether to laugh or cry. And, you know, that's what's kind of like, you know, but I've like come to the point where I'm like not scared to fight people. I mean, I don't want to fight people in the mosque, so, you know, I try not to do that. But I do have some funny stories, like, you know, another story I'll share with you. So we were traveling, we went to Egypt, and the professor was invited to give a talk at a conference that was hosted by Al-Azhar. So it was held at the JW Marriott. And if you've ever been to Egypt and gone to the JW Marriott, it's like this really posh, beautiful hotel, 5-star, you know, incredible, like, amenities. I mean, basically you don't feel like you're in Egypt, you just feel like, you know, you're like at the Ritz-Carlton or whatever. So we were there, Mita was about 3, and they had this incredible water park. It was just like they had recreated like a beach, you know, with the water that would flow in like the tide, but it was all artificial, you know, it was just incredible. And so we wanted to go and swim there. And so I'm like, okay, you know, so of course for every Muslim woman, the issue of, well, what do I wear when I'm out swimming, right? So I thought, okay, well, no problem, you know, I put on kind of like, basically like workout gear. You know, I had like a long sleeve shirt, and I had like some workout pants, not the really tight ones, but you know, the ones that are, you know, workout clothes. So, and they were like Lycra, so it's kind of like swim material. And then I had kind of a skirt and like a little, you know, pull-on thing. So Mito and I went out there, and we were like having fun, and all of a sudden, this guy comes up to me and says, "Excuse me, you can't swim here." And I'm like, "Why? What do you mean?" "You're not wearing proper attire." And he was saying to me that I wasn't wearing like one of these skimpy bathing suits, like a Western bathing suit. And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "No, you're not allowed to wear that here. You can go over to the pool, but you can't wear this here." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "No, this is not acceptable." I'm like, "Do you know where we are? We're in a Muslim country. You're telling me that I can't go swimming here because I'm not wearing like a revealing swimsuit?" I'm like, "Let me talk to your manager." And so he went and he got his manager, and same thing. I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm a paying customer here. I should be able to go swimming. You're telling me I can't go swimming because I'm not wearing a skimpy, you know, bathing suit?" And this guy, you know, I could tell he was like someone, you know, like he was not one of the rich people that was working there. He seemed like a decent person. So I zeroed in on the guilt factor. I'm like, "I'm a convert. I'm a Muslim. You want to tell me as a Muslim woman that you're not going to let me swim here unless I show my body? What are you going to tell Allah? You know, you want me to be like, you know, immodest? Don't you pray? Aren't you worried that you're going to have to answer to this? You know, my son wants to swim." And I like went off on him. finally he was like, fine, go. And I came back and I told the professor, I told the professor, and he was like, oh my God, I can take you anywhere. But I was like, okay, but I'm an American convert, I know my rights, right? And I wasn't doing anything wrong. So then the next day we wanted to go pray, and again at the Marriott, right? So we're like, okay, where should we go? When's the next prayer time? And like, I don't know, because I didn't have my internet set up. I'm like, let me call the front desk. So I call the front desk, and I'm like, well, do you know what time the next prayer time is? And the guy's like, no. What? Prayer time? What? Prayer time. I'm like, okay, maybe he just doesn't know the exact prayer time. I'm like, okay, never mind. Just what's the nearest mosque so we can go pray? Nearest mosque? I don't know. And he like goes and he asks everybody. I'm like, we're in Egypt. This is a Muslim country. You guys don't know like what the prayer times are. You don't know where the mosque is. I'm like, oh my God, and it's just, it's just like sad, right? Because, it's like, as a Muslim, you want to feel like you're in a Muslim country, these things should be easy, but I guess it doesn't happen that way at the Marriott.
It's not on the training manual.
So, okay, and I have to tell you this funny story, because people don't know this, or most people don't know this, is that at one point I actually was a hijabi. And it's not what you think. I mean, I have told lots of stories about how, from the time that I converted, I really had an issue with hijab, and I was just like, no, I don't, I know the call is for modesty, and I personally don't believe that, God intended for every woman to wear a scarf. And I've told the story about how, I asked the professor about it and how we went through the books and, all that stuff, so you can go back and take a look at that. But when we were in Texas, this story turns a little bit sad, but this was at the time when I've shared stories about how, my struggles as a convert, and my family was really unhappy about me converting, and we had a lot of tough times. So this was at a time when I was, not in contact at all. I was estranged from my parents. So, and for those who don't know, I after I converted, for 8 years, things got so bad that I had to cut relations with them. But so at this time, I had started a new job. We had moved to Texas now, and I was working now for H-E-B Grocery Company, if anybody knows Texas. And I was working as a brand manager in their private label brands. And I purposely didn't want to tell my family where I was, because I was cutting off relations, and for my own survival. But anyway, and by the way, things are really good with my family now, so none of this is intended to sort of like raise hard feelings. But I think it's an important story to tell, because I want people to understand like what converts go through when they actually convert. So somehow, my mother figured out where I worked, she figured out who my boss was, and she managed somehow to get in contact with him and have a conversation, something to the effect of, would you mind, and these are like Bible thumping, Christians in this part of Texas. So would you mind if I call you every so often? My daughter converted to Islam, she got married. I'm really worried about her, something like her husband doesn't let me talk to her, which is not true. And he, being a good Christian, because she was like, I'm a good Christian, you're a good Christian, and he trying to be, kind, I guess, I don't know, maybe, anti-Muslim, whatever. He agreed. So they would have conversations every so often. She would actually call him and check in on me. I eventually found out, and I was so livid, that I went to HR and I complained, and I said, how could this happen? Can you imagine your mom is so upset you converted that she goes and finds out who your boss is at a professional company and develops a relationship over anti-Islam beliefs, right? So I bring it up to HR. I eventually lose my job over that, just because, the person who was my boss had been there forever, and I had not been there for very long. And so I was like, okay, that's it. For my next job, I'm going to wear hijab. But I'm not going to wear hijab in the way, it's going to be a totally different thing. I mean, it was like I worked for, I got a new job at UT Austin, working for a technology incubator. And I feel sorry for my boss. She was a really nice, British woman, and I interviewed with her, and I looked completely normal, and it was wonderful. And I accepted the job, and then I called her, and I'm like, well, I just want to let you know that when I show up for my first day, I've decided to wear a Muslim scarf. And, you know, so she's like, that's fine. You know, she was educated and, you know, she was open, and obviously she didn't want to show any kind of like prejudice or anything. So I show up, it's not like one of these beautiful stylish ones, like Rami's wife wears, right? But it's like this big old black tent. Here's the picture, guys. This is my little thing. But it was like I would literally drive to work, I would park, I would pull on my hijab, go to work, and then when I would leave, I would take it off in the parking lot and go home. And that's what I did like, for almost a whole year. And it was fascinating. I mean, it was a fascinating social experiment. Okay, because I'm used to, you know, like I was coming from, you know, a brand management job where you kind of have to deal with a lot of different people in a lot of different areas, and you know, you have to be very outgoing and you know all of this sort of stuff. And this job, the new job that I took, was not like that. I mean, it was more of like a research job, but I still had to interact with people, and it was really interesting because all the people that were like my age and younger avoided me like the plague. Like nobody wanted to talk to me just because I was wearing a scarf. And the only people that, you know, didn't really have a problem were people who were like the professors or who were older or more educated. Like they were the ones who actually didn't have an issue with me. So it really informed like my attitudes and my ideas about, you know, wearing hijab. I mean, it sort of confirmed it because I really believe that, you know, we as Muslims have to be ambassadors for our faith. And if something like a scarf is going to prevent people from seeing you as normal to the point that they're not even wanting to talk to you, that's a problem. How are you going to teach us that Islam is beautiful and people are just turned off by, you know, like the fear? And, you know, especially when this is not something that I believe that God intended for women. So we have so many. I mean, I think every Muslim, you know, has a convert woman, has hijab stories. And, you know, I mean, honestly, like, what could be funnier than all these people fighting over, like, a woman wearing a kufa on their head? Like, if you think about it, you know, in any other religion, it's actually quite comical. But for us, it's like a matter of faith. And, you know, like, we, at the time in Texas, is really interesting because this was kind of, the professor was teaching, like, a Quran class at UT Austin, and there would be students, and especially women, who would come, and they were so taken by the beauty of the message. And they became interested, and then they would go to the mosque, and then they would, of course, meet someone who would say, well, no, you can't become Muslim unless you wear a hijab. It's, you know, it's an article of faith. And so this really, you know, upset us. And people would eventually leave, you know, as if, like, the scarf was more important than actually becoming a Muslim. But, you know, and it was so bad that even, you know, this was back in 1996, that a lot of the professor's students were asking for, like, a halaqa about, you know, hijab. And so he went for several hours, you know, through all the detail, the issues, the evidence, you know, and actually you can hear this discussion on SoundCloud. We have the recordings available. It's from 1996, but subhanAllah, the issues are still present today, if not worse. So oftentimes, you know, I get really fed up, and I'm on Facebook a lot, and you know, you see the stupidity that goes on, and it's like, fine, I'm done. I'm sort of sick of this whole hijab thing. But every so often, I don't know, that insanity comes and takes me over, and I decide to actually engage and like respond. And it usually has to do with hijab. So in this case, my last hijab story. So I started listening to this podcast, and it's called Salam Girl, and so you can imagine that it's like two converts from Texas. And they married Arabs, so now they wear the scarf, and they wear the thobe, and, you know, they like took on the whole thing. And it's like, Salam girl, you know, and they have these conversations, and it's, you know, it's cute. It's like everything is cute about it. So they, you know, they tell you how to tie your hijab, they tell you how to, you know, what food to cook for Ramadan, how to decorate your house. You know, it's not intended to be like a huge intellectual thing. And so they create like a Facebook page, and most of the women that are on there, you know, share like their stories and ask questions, and they're mostly, you know, young Muslim women converts, white. So recently, I made the mistake of engaging. This one woman asked the question, okay, well, I converted, my parents don't have an issue with me being Muslim, but they hate the fact that I wear a hijab. So do you have any suggestions? And so women were commenting about different things. And so I'm like, okay, you know what? This is my opportunity. I just want people to educate themselves and let them know that, you know, it's not like hijab is a sixth pillar. There is actually other evidence So I wrote something to the effect of, it's great, if you want to wear a scarf, but it's not, there are multiple views about this, that this isn't, a requirement, and if you want to know all the issues and evidence, here's a link to the SoundCloud recording so you can listen to it and you can decide for yourself. Because that's what we like to do here. So here's the evidence, you decide for yourself. So 2 nasty women came after me on the Salon Girl podcast. I mean, this is like, everybody has to be sweet and nice. And one woman's like, why do you hate hijab so much? We're not talking about that. Why do you always come in? And I'm like, I'm not an advocate for squashing the hijab. I'm an advocate for education. I think people need to make their own decisions about this and know that there are other opinions. And so, of course, the woman didn't like that. And then she came and attacked me, and she said, you've made a name for yourself as being, an aggressive, anti-hijab proselytizer, and quite frankly, I am sick and tired of you taking the opportunity to share your husband's opinions and your own when no one else has asked you. This is like, and I was like, whoa. And I was like, okay, this is like the side of the internet, right? You can just like spew venom. It's like, are you an anti? No, antis aren't online. But, so I thought, okay. And it bothered me and not, and so I just kind of wrote like, wow, that was a really mean-spirited comment, and may Allah guide us all. It's like, there's just so many challenges, right? And I think, there's a lot that we can joke about. Humor is really, really important. Oh, I have to say one more thing before I finish with my last stories. So, when I was kicking around this idea of doing this, and again, thank you guys for laughing, I really appreciate it.
You're funny.
Thank you. I was trying to, you practice, right? And nobody's laughing, so you're like, okay, please, God, I hope someone will laugh. And so I'm like, well, it's okay, it's fine. It's a small group of people, it's not going to matter. It's, no one watches our videos anyway, and people know me, so it's not a big deal. And so I stayed up late, I went to bed, and I wake up. So if anyone still is not sure about proof of God or that God has a sense of humor, I sleep, I have my phone next to me, I wake up, I look at it, I check my email. Rami Youssef, is it okay if I bring my dad to the halaqa? Oh, God. Okay, sure. Oh, my God. So, God was punishing me for that arrogance, the anger that went to insanity, that went to arrogance. And God is swift in his justice. But God is merciful, so thank you for watching.
And the notes in the top.
Oh, yes! Okay, and then the other thing that's really, I always tell you guys, okay, so we have these things called,
that's another part.
oh my God, this is, okay, so we have this double attack, right? Always when things happen, when we're about to have like important, like meetings, or we're trying to finish publishing something, and the computer stops printing, and it starts having weird things that happen. So of course, after I see Rami's email, I'm like, oh God, I gotta get up and practice. Okay, so I get up, and I like have my printout, and I'm walking around the house, and I'm trying to like do stuff, because we have dogs and all this and everything. So all of a sudden, I cannot find my notes. I just had my phone and my notes, and it's just the house. I'm walking around, and I'm like, where the heck did my notes go? So I told the professor, okay, first of all, I'm having problems printing it out of the computer, and now I can't find the notes. And so he's like, okay, double attack. I'm like, totally. So I'm getting ready, I go out and I print another note, and then I go into the bathroom. And where are my notes? In the toilet. And I'm like, how did this happen? And then I remembered, okay, I put it on the sink. The toilet's right there. I was doing laundry, so I must have, I told the professor, he's like, no way, double attack. So I was like, I hope this is just not a sign that I'm going to bomb. Like, in the toilet. Okay. But anyway, so these stories are funny, but I think, the laughter is great, but the most important thing is if we can take the humor to really think about what is really important here and what's important, in our life. The humor is really important for us because we often, like I say, we deal with a lot of really heavy issues all the time. We're watching the news. We're trying to, balance out the darkness and the light. And, we get a lot of messages from people too. And so really beautiful messages. And so I just wanted to share a couple. These are not funny, but they're serious. And they're things that kind of help you put everything into perspective. So one story is that, and I'm better actually at making people cry than laugh, I think. So we'll see if that's true. But so a woman actually wrote us, and she was a classmate of the professor's older sister many years ago in Kuwait. And she had seen his khutbah on Nicki Minaj and Saudi Arabia. Like when, the Saudis invited Nicki Minaj, right, to the Hijaz. And then how, Nicki Minaj came through because she basically, did research on the Saudi human rights record and said, no, I'm not going there, I'm not supporting that. So the professor was like, I have respect now for Nicki Minaj because she stands up for justice more than some Muslims. And that was, of course, very controversial. So anyway, but this beautiful woman wrote and said, I remember you, and I just want to thank you for this beautiful email. For this beautiful khutbah, and went on to discuss in a lot of detail why it meant so much to her. And she then offered that she actually volunteers, in Tucson, for one of these migrant shelters. And that, ICE has tried to undermine, she works at a Benedictine, church, where they take in a lot of migrants and migrant children. And that, ICE has seen that they are trying to do good. And so in order to be more evil, they would basically bring more migrants and dump them there to try and, push them past their capacity. But what she saw is she was saying that, it's so touching to see how many people in this community come forward and to step up and help. And she said, I only wish that Muslims would do the same. And she's like, and I thought that I should try, because other churches and synagogues have opened up their doors to take the overflow of these migrants. And she said, I thought about going to the mosque to see if they would do the same, but I'm really scared that they're going to insult the migrants because unfortunately we have, uncle leadership at our mosque. And so that was really sad, that just kind of, puts things into perspective. The last story, that's just beautiful. The professor talked about this because I actually, on Facebook, I came across this really beautiful orphanage in Syria. They're called Little Hearts, Curcino. I think it's like an Italian word, must mean little hearts too. But so Omar, who is working there, is posting videos constantly about showing the orphans and cats they rescue, and it's just beautiful because they're in Idlib, okay? So they're getting bombed and killed, and his friend, he posts pictures of friends that have died. They're putting together bags of food and things and taking them out to the families that are there. And so the professor was talking about them, and we were hoping, to share the message so people could donate. But in the last few days, he posted the picture of this dog, and the dog was injured in his leg, and from a bombing. And the dog was 3 hours away, and so in order to go save this dog, he had to drive 3 hours across, bombing and shelling and all of that. And he did it. And for us, we've rescued about 50 dogs, over 50 dogs in the time that we've been married. And so for us, we're already know we're insane. We'll take dogs in and we'll chase them down and whatever. We don't do it so much anymore, but we did it for a while. But the idea of someone driving 3 hours across war-torn Syria to save one dog and doing it was just put us to shame. And he made it, and then as he posted it, he reminded everybody, God says if you save one life, it's like you've saved all of humanity. And that's just, so beautiful. So I just wanted to close with that. But it's like a message of hope, and just, for everything that we go through here, there are people out there suffering, surviving, and still able to find their way through God. That's it. What time is it? I don't know if we want to stop and pray or...
5:45.
5:44. Let's start. Because we
have, what time is Asr?
5 something.
Over at almost 8, I think. It's 8 something.
Well, let me make let me make some remarks and then we pick for prayer and then we start. Bismillah.
Also like, well, it's not over.
Oh yeah, I'll get you one.
But
Yeah.
we'll I
taking
just
off?
have
I'll wait. Oh, okay.
a quick comment about the what about the folks in Syria. What I think once you take the power of the state out of the equation and the ugliness that is committed in one way or another to preserve and sustain despotism, when Muslims are left to their innate fitra, their innate sensibilities of what Islam is, the Islam that existed and grew in the soil of Muslim societies for centuries, I think it sprouts things that are very beautiful. So that fellow in Syria, we all grow up knowing the story of the man that was forgiven all his sins and entered. God gifted that man was heaven because that man saved a dog who was thirsty in the desert. Paraphrasing the hadith, a man saw a dog in the desert who was very thirsty, dying of thirst, so he climbed down a well, brought water up, gave it to the dog, and for saving the life of this dog, and God said, enter heaven. And obviously the story, like a lot of narratives like that, attributed to the Prophet, and this hadith actually is of good soundness. I mean, it's not an ahadi hadith. It's not just singular transmissions. It's not a munqata. It's not a marfu. It's on. So in other words, it's probably a story that the Prophet ﷺ did in fact say, but the folks in Syria, I mean, when you read, here are people that have dedicated their lives to doing nothing but taking care of orphans. And as I said before, they sing with these orphans, they dance with these orphans. When the bombs are falling and the children hear the explosions, they need to be distracted. And the way they distract them is to sing and dance with them. And leave alone feed them and become their parents, become their source of warmth. In addition to that, they save cats, and then they hear about an injured dog that is 3 hours away in very dangerous territory, and they have to, they make the drive to find the dog and save the dog and drive the dog back, putting their life at risk. I mean, honestly, when you see things like that and people like that, you feel ashamed about every complaint you made in your life and every lazy moment, every sour moment, every moment of anger. It's you know, your issues pale in comparison. But the people who sustained Islam through the centuries are these unsung heroes. These you know, Muslims like my mother. I know how much good my mother has done, and no one knows her, and no one knows her name, and no one will remember, except the people that she interacted with directly. I mean, it's important, and I wish that we if we were effective, there would be a way in which we would expose our converts to that lived Islam, that Islam of beauty, that Islam that has sustained and existed for centuries, and that survived the onslaught and the trauma of colonialism, and that survived despite the onslaught and trauma of Wahhabism, and that now survives to exist, that sprouted the democratic and the urge for freedom and justice that we all saw in what was called the Arab Springs, and now is suffering the counter-revolution, which is normally what usually happens in history. For every revolution, there is a counter-revolution. And the more people ache to express their innate sense of justice and innate sense of freedom, there are people that are opposed to that innate sense of justice and innate sense of freedom. So I just a quick comment on what Grace said, because I mean, when I saw this story, I just felt so embarrassed by all the things that I whined to God about. And all our saving of dogs didn't involve putting our lives at risk. I mean, it just involved the inconvenience of taking dogs that no one else wanted, cleaning after them, feeding them, and so on. But, you know, it's not... Now, okay, the other thing is, I didn't know that you were up all night being frantic because you were trying to come up with jokes. If you would have asked me, I would have told you, I've been married to you long enough, don't try it. I mean, we've been married 30 years, and no. I mean, you're very good with you get mad and you get all dramatic and
arrogant. See, I was like, I can do it.
No, if you would have asked me, I've told you. Just, I mean, poor woman, you tormented yourself. Okay, I have no sense of humor, and you know.
You're funny.
No, I have no sense of humor. She doesn't have no sense of humor
She's
either.
funny too.
I mean, we can just sit there and be completely amazed at, like, what are comedians about? You know, how the heck do they do it? Okay, anyway. But, okay, so...
It was not bad though, right?
No, it wasn't bad.
Okay.
You get an A for an F for the effort. You get an F for effort. I mean, it's better than making people cry. But I mean, all these stories, Grace. I mean, you have to understand. And she's really with her hot temper, red temper, and she gets all worked up. You know, I'm like right there, the first one that takes in the first wave of, can you believe? And oh my Lord. And it was, and Grace always says that she does this so that I can go to Jannah.
There's a lot of hasanat.
Every time, it's sort of, I guess like in the Egypt thing, of course we are colonized people, so it's like my psychology was, well, of course, they're not going to want a woman who's not wearing a balbus swimming suit. Balbus means, in my language, naked. That's a word that I invented for naked. Balbus, a women's swimming suit. It's all, and I was like completely amazed that Grace was standing her ground, and that she actually started. I mean, I don't think the people who work in a hotel in Egypt would have ever expected an American to be telling them, do you pray? Aren't you afraid of Allah? What are you going to tell Allah the hereafter? And I was sitting there, my face was all red, and I started drifting away, pretending not to know her. oh my gosh. And they looked so shocked. I felt really bad for them, actually. And they don't realize, she doesn't realize that, you know, this involves amni dawla. This is like state security, national security stuff. You know, if they allow you to swim, probably the secret police would show up and arrest them.
Yeah.
But Grace thought that, you know, they should stand by principle.
You should fear God.
That's the part where you feel, okay, you know, I'm a person who's been colonized and defeated. And that's why converts are the hope. Because they don't have the defeated psychology like I do. Okay. Shall we pray us and then start the Duha? Okay.